It gives me great pleasure this morning here to introduce Rabbi Yossi Jacobson, one of the most sought-after Jewish speakers in the whole world today. He has lectured to Jewish and non-Jewish audiences on 6 continents and in 40 states. He is the author of the acclaimed tape series on Kabbalah, A Tale of Two Souls, Captain My Captain, and a forthcoming book, The Kabbalah of Marriage. Rabbi Jacobson is a professor of Jewish psychology and Jewish law at the Rabbinical College Shovevei Torah in New York and serves as the editor-in-chief of the international Yiddish-English weekly, the Allgemeine Journal, the largest such newspaper in the world. His weekly internet essays on Judaism, Kabbalah, and psychology are read by tens of thousands worldwide. In 1988, at the age of 15, Yossi Jacobson was taken in to serve on a small team of oral scribes and human tape recorders charged with the duty to memorize and transcribe 3 to 7 hours of talks by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, one of the great Jewish thinkers of our time, presented on Sabbath and Jewish holidays when recording devices are not used. And so it is my pleasure and honor to present Rabbi Jacobson. Let's just make sure you're set up here, okay? Try it.
Good morning.
Hey, perfect.
So this history teacher turns to his classroom and says, "My dear students, would anybody care to give me the date and the author of the following declaration? Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Who said it and when?" Very good. The students displayed absolute ignorance, shrugging their shoulders. Only one student knew the answer. This was a boy who came from Tokyo, Japanese kid to study in the States. And he immediately says it was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, January 22nd, 1961, during his inauguration address. It was raining that day in Washington. The teacher was deeply impressed with the Japanese student and profoundly annoyed with the American kids. "What shall become of you, lazy, good-for-nothings, spoiled brats, addicted to your Palm Pilots and cell phones, to your boyfriends and girlfriends, to your new cars and your televisions? Fat! A disgrace. You know nothing of the ideas, the values, the dreams that molded and crafted the great leaders of this country. I am embarrassed." And for 20 minutes he begins chastising the American students, saying, "We must learn from the Japanese." Here is a boy from foreign culture, foreign country and civilization, and yet displays so much perseverance and commitment and dedication. He knows what John Kennedy said, when Kennedy said it, January 61, and for the next half an hour extolling the virtues of the Japanese. Until there's a voice heard from the back of the classroom, and you'll excuse me, I just like telling stories the way they happened. One of the students in the back of the classroom gives a scream, "The hell with the Japanese." The teacher was dumbfounded. 21 years in a classroom. Nobody ever spoke to him such words. He shouts, "Who said that? And the student responds, Harry Truman, 1945. And I feel that I am privileged to be here this morning in the presence of human beings who awake each morning asking not what America can do for them, but asking what you can do for our country, for our men and women in service, for our God, for our people. Especially when we are living in a climate and a time when so many, even among Americans themselves, are prone to say, the heck with the United States of America. It is a privilege and an honor to be here in your presence this morning, and I want to thank you for that. So my dear friends, esteemed Army Chief of Chaplains, Chaplain Douglas Carver, who has bestowed upon me the privilege of addressing you today as the religious keynote. I want to thank Matt Goff for your attention to detail. And my long old time, my dear friend, grew up a few houses away from him, Chaplain Jacob Goldstein, who has been instrumental in bringing me here today to this conference. Honor chaplains of our military, dedicated servants to God. Spiritual leadership during persistent conflict is our theme this morning. And I want to discuss with you 4 components from the literature, the history, and the tradition of Judaism, relevant to spiritual leadership in a time of persistent conflict. Number 1, individual attention. Number 2, meaning in brokenness. Number 3, relevance of God. And number 4, the secret to resilience. In my imagination, perhaps the most exemplary chaplain of all times was a man, I'm privileged to carry his name, Yosef in Hebrew, Joseph in English. One of the great heroes of the Bible, a good-looking, handsome young man. So many of you, I'm sure, can identify. And in my imagination, still one of the most beloved, charming, graceful characters in the Torah and the Bible. But one scene that stands out in my mind this morning as I address you, and which I believe makes him perhaps the greatest, one of the great chaplains of all time, if I can use that term, is in Genesis chapter 40. This young boy has been incarcerated, imprisoned, under false accusations that he tried to have an immoral, promiscuous relationship with his master's wife. He's incarcerated for years. Egypt is not a democracy. 3,500 years ago. Shady democracy today too. But I guess we won't go there at the moment. Well, things don't change, right? Or not that fast. They once asked a Chinese general in the 1950s, what is your opinion of the French and American revolutions? He said, too early to tell. But I stand there as a people who's been around for 4,000 years. It's been around through thick and thin, through paradise and hell, and back and forth and back and forth. And one of the great personalities that always inspired my people, all of our people, all of God's children, is Joseph. In prison, an innocent man, truly innocent. Tragic life. Lost his mother as a young boy. Rachel died during childbirth of her second son. sold into slavery by his own brothers, not by strangers, not by the mafia, by his own siblings who threw him into a pit and then sold him as a slave. And a slave in those times meant a slave for life. From a prince, he was now subjugated for the remainder of his life. And then after he made it in his master's home, he is now thrown into a dungeon in Egypt under false, truly false accusations. He was innocent, he was pure, he was a good boy, and he was young, 17. And he's in prison for years. And the Bible tells us how two other ministers of Pharaoh, the emperor, are also plunged into that dungeon. Pharaoh's baker and Pharaoh's butler in Genesis chapter 40. And then there's a scene. Joseph, who becomes an assistant to the prison ward, comes to them one morning. And he sees, and I use the original term, he sees that they are zoafim, they're dejected, they're melancholy, they're depressed. And Joseph turns to these two prisoners and asks them, Madua peneichem ra'im hayom? Why are you so melancholy today? Why do your faces look so sad? And they tell him, we had a dream. And we don't know the meaning to this dream. And we're upset. Joseph says, God has the solution for dreams. Why don't you share with me your dreams? And they do so, and he explains to them the symbolism behind these dreams. The symbolisms which come true in their life. And years later, Pharaoh has a dream. And he's searching for the meaning behind them. And the butler says, when I was in prison back in the good old days. Well, that's my own quote. There was this Jewish lad, a Hebrew kid, who gave me a brilliant interpretation for my dream. And Pharaoh says, summon him. And Joseph is summoned, and we know the end of the story. He becomes the viceroy of Egypt, implementing the entire economic strategy that would save not only Egypt, but the entire Fertile Crescent and civilization from a devastating famine. 7 years followed by 7 years of plenty. We know the big story. Joseph becomes viceroy. He leads the world. He reunites with his father, with his brothers. But the details. He's in prison. And he sees two people. Not of his own faith, not of his own age, not of his own standing. And they look down. They seem dejected. And he approaches them and he wants to know why. He cares. He doesn't say, big deal. They're having a bad day. Take some Prozac. Take some Zoloft. Go to therapy. It's not my problem. Blame your mother. Joseph, who's a young boy, approaches them and says, tell me, guys, why aren't you happy? What's bothering you? A simple question of human caring. And what is the result of that question? Not just that he gets a pat on his back from Chaplain Carver. You're a good man. That too. But the result of it is that he saves the world from hunger. Because ultimately, by sharing with him their dream and he explaining it to them, he becomes the viceroy of Egypt who saves the world from hunger. This is how the Bible understands history. History is not created only through leaders, prime ministers, great men or women in power. In the imagination of Torah, in the biblical imagination, we change the world through one good morning towards one individual soldier who is in distress, to one human being who is melancholy, who feels alienated, sad. The one good morning, why are you down today? What can I do for you? In the biblical imagination is capable of saving the world, not only spiritually, but sometimes even literally, physically. It reminds me of that old Jewish tale. A young boy was standing at a beach and picking up starfish that remained stuck there when the tide retreated. And the starfish he lifted and he was throwing them back into the water to save them. And an old cynical man who's been around the block 10 or 11 times looks at this boy throwing the starfish into the sea and he says, "You foolish little kid, this beach stretches for dozens of miles. There are millions and millions of starfish dying here every moment. Even if you stand 10 hours a day throwing the starfish into the water, you will not save even 5% of them. Your efforts are futile. What you're doing makes no difference." The boy looked at him. He looked at the starfish he was holding in his hand. As he threw it into the water, he told this man, "To this one, it makes all the difference." This story captures a fundamental idea in biblical thought. We can't fix the world all at once. We do it one day at a time, one person at a time, one deed at a time. A single life, said our sages in the Talmud, is like a world. Save a life and you save a world. Change a life and you begin to change the world. This is Joseph, an exemplary chaplain in our lives as well. You, chosen by God to minister, to shepherd men and women in the service, often tormented by the challenges they face that other citizens do not have to face. The sacrifices they make, not 12 hours a day, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as Joseph, you approach one soldier, one man or one woman. You look sad today. Of course, he's been separated from his family. She's been separated from her family, from a spouse, from those angelic, cute children that so many others are lucky to put to sleep each night with a lullaby, with a goodnight kiss, and with a story. He may be scared. He may be fearful of the unknown. He may be depressed of what happened to a good friend. Or he's just having a bad day. We are Josephs. We ought to approach him or her. Give them an embrace. Give them a kiss. Tell them that we care and ask them to share. Just like in Joseph's case, he will most probably, or she will most probably tell you about a dream. A dream that they had that might have been broken. A dream that they had that may have been devastated. Or a dream that they have for the future. Give them that dream back. We never underestimate in the biblical imagination the dignity, the value of an individual, and the individual attention to a single man or woman who look melancholy. You remember that scene in Nuremberg trial when a Nazi doctor who sentenced an innocent, a Nazi judge who sentenced an innocent Jewish doctor in Berlin to death in 1935 was then convicted and given 25 years. And when the American judge enters his cell, he says, "Your Honor, in 1935 I did not know it would end up being 6 million. I thought I was killing one innocent human being. If I would have known that Hitler would have taken it to 6 million, I would have never done it." And the American judge told him, "You're making a big mistake. The moment you kill one innocent person, there's no difference between 1 and 6 million. Because if one life has no value, 10 lives have no value, 100 lives have no value. Where does life begin to have value?" Stalin, the tyrant, once said, "One death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths, a statistic." Our country, your country, the country you represent every day, understood this well. With the grace of God, they understood that if one life doesn't have absolute value, 1 billion lives have no absolute value. If I don't care about an individual human being, I can't care about a collective body of human beings. After all, 1 million people are made up of individuals. And it's fascinating, the countries that claim, who cares of the individual? The main thing is community. At the end, they ended up repressing the individual and the community. The United States of America, which understood, based on the biblical tradition, that the individual human being was created in the image of God, ended up becoming the beacon of light, offering liberty and hope, personal expression, and freedom for religion for untold individuals. Joseph understood this many thousands of years ago, before our democracy was around, when he approached two people in distress in a prison and said, "Why do you look down today?" But my dear friends, I ask you a question. What in the world was Joseph thinking? They're in a dungeon. You come to me, "Hey guys, why aren't you happy?" "Hey genius, Joseph, what are we eating, sushi at a bar mitzvah? Dancing at a wedding? We're on a death row in this dungeon. The Bible calls it a pit, a bore, for heaven's sake. What should we be doing? Dancing a kazatska? A waltz? I mean, what about Joseph himself? What about he himself? If you would approach a psychoanalyst or a therapist and give them a resume of Joseph's life, age 9, orphaned, hated by his family, 17, kidnapped, almost murdered, sold into slavery, accused of seduction and immorality, thrown into a dungeon, and you would ask the psychoanalyst, "What's the hope for this young man?" I don't want to answer the question, but I doubt he would believe that a medication would suffice. And yet, Joseph approaches these two individuals and says, "Hey guys, why are you dejected?" As though he was this jolly, happy-go-lucky, spirited fellow in the lobby of a beautiful 5-star retreat, telling them, "Hey, why do you look down? The weather is so beautiful. Did you see the ocean this morning?" And here I share with you a great teaching I heard from my own spiritual mentor, Rabbi Goldstein's spiritual mentor, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, Rabbi Schneerson, who once said this: Joseph was permeated with the awareness on a constant basis that there is meaning to every moment in life, that we are on a journey, and every moment is part of that journey. And the greatest thing we can do for a human being is grant them the dignity in every moment and every experience, showing them how in every experience of their life they have an opportunity to grow, how every experience grants them the potential to connect with their own soul, to connect with the soul of other people, to connect to God and to fulfill His will. Every moment and experience in life, Joseph understood as an invitation from God to connect with Him in a unique way relative to the particular circumstances of that moment. Joseph understood what would become a fundamental idea in Judaism. There is no accident that we are here at this time, at this place, with these gifts, capabilities, and challenges, and the opportunity to make a difference. This belief is known in our tradition as divine providence. The idea that God is active in our lives as individuals, not only as the Greek philosophers believed, concerned only with universals. We are here because there is a task that only we can fulfill. We can never know the ripple of consequences set in motion by a slightest act. But what we do know is we're here now, in this place, at this time, among these people, with these men and women in service, under unique, strenuous, and difficult conditions. We can do an act or say a word and give them the dignity to know that they can light a flame within the circumstances of darkness, a little light. The Jewish mystics used to say, drive away much darkness. And when one light is joined to another light, mine to yours and yours to others, soldier to soldier, man to man, woman to woman, there is a dance of flames, sometimes so small and yet so beautiful. I'm not sure this is the place, but I grew up in Brooklyn, as our dear MC introduced me. I know you hear the accent. Not in Savannah. If anybody was making the mistake. In the tradition of Judaism and in a Hasidic community. I don't know for how many the word Hasidic, what that means. But Hasidic is a form of Judaism that puts a lot of emphasis on the spiritual dimensions of the Jewish religion. And so here is an old Hasidic tale, one of my favorites. There are two great brothers who live in Poland. And somehow, in the old-time Poland, a police officer gets upset at them. And of course, in good old Polish style with Jews, he throws them into prison. Back in a cell, just like Joseph. And there are 40 people there, and there's no bathroom. There is a pail in the corner that is being used. They sleep there. In the morning, one of the brothers is weeping. His brother says, "Bro, why are you weeping?" He says, "Well, I don't have to tell you that there's a law in Judaism that we're not allowed to pray in a room that stinks. And the odor here is just horrific. I can't pray. This will be the first day of my life that I will not pray to God." I'm crying. His brother plays dumb and he says, "Okay, there's always a first for everything." He says, "No, I need to pray." He says, "Why?" He says, "For me, prayer is the time when I connect to the essence of reality. God is not just a God in heaven, abstract force. God is actually the essence of reality. God is the reality of reality. God is my essence. God is the essence of life. When I pray in the morning, I realign my life to my epicenter, to my focal point, to my quintessence. Then my entire day is wholesome, holistic, focused, powerful, healthy. But when I don't pray in the morning, I'm fragmented. I'm disaligned. I'm fragmented into many pieces. I'm alienated. I must have my relationship with my God." And his brother says, who says that the only relationship can be built through prayer? Sometimes you connect to God through prayer. But in times like this, when God forbids you to pray, you connect to God by fulfilling His will and not praying. That is also a relationship. Now you build a relationship through obeying His will and abstaining from prayer. You will fulfill His will that way, and you will build a relationship through that. He says, I didn't think of it that way. Wow, a relationship through abstaining from prayer because He doesn't want me to pray. So instead of crying, he starts singing. And they were two Hasidic Jews, so within minutes they were dancing. The 48 inmates who were not Jewish see these two guys dancing. Come, let's join. And within 5 minutes, you had there what looked like a great, great wedding. People were dancing and singing. It was awesome. The prison warden hears this commotion. He runs into the cell and he sees 40 inmates dancing, celebrating. He begins hollering at one of them, "What is the cause of your celebration? Why are you so happy?" And they point to the center. You see those two rabbis? They're guilty. They instigated. We would have been depressed. But they did this whole thing. The prison warden says, "Can you explain to me what is making them so happy? What are they celebrating?" The man shrugs his shoulders and points to the bucket. The prison warden says, "That bucket of human filth? Why is that so exciting? He says, don't ask me, but they were telling us that somehow, as a result of this bucket, they developed a new type of relationship with God. There was the pre-bucket relationship and the post-bucket relationship. The prison warden says, these miserable prisoners, I will teach them a lesson. And he takes the bucket and throws it out of the cell. So one brother turns to his other brother and says, brother, now you can begin praying. Each day is not one day. Each day is 2 days. There's the day I plan for myself, and there's the day God plans for me. We don't have one Palm Pilot. We have two. I have my own, but God has His. And nobody knows how to hot sync the two. It would have been nice. Could make some money too if you figure that one out. I wake up in the morning and I have my plans. I know what I'm going to do minute to minute, but God may have very different plans for me. If this is true about every human being, how much more so is it true about our men and women in service, who are often in the line of fire, and whose lives go through so many vicissitudes and fluctuations, from moments of tranquility to moments of supreme danger. You remember that scene. It's one of the most unforgettable scenes in Exodus chapter 32, when Moses breaks the tablets. He comes down from the mountain and he has the tablets given by God, and he sees the golden calf that the Israelites created, and he takes the 2 tablets and he breaks them. And in the original Hebrew, God tells Moses, he says, Asher Shibarta, which means, according to the Talmud, thank you for breaking them. There are some Hebrew words that have many different nuanced meanings and are not always given over in the English King James translation. One of them is this: thank you for breaking them. And the question is, what's the thank you? The tablets were crafted by God Almighty Himself, the Bible tells us in Exodus 32. He wrote them, He engraved them, He made them. Moses felt the Israelites were undeserving of them. You know what he should have done? Give them back to their Creator. Go up to the mountain and say, God, they don't want them. Sell them on eBay. Or keep them in your celestial museum, I guess. Why break them? Why break the tablets? Open your hearts for one of the great lessons of the great Jewish mystics. Moses wanted to teach the Jewish people a very profound lesson. Sometimes you serve God through whole tablets, and sometimes you connect to God through broken tablets. When we sin in life, when we create golden calves, when we make mistakes in life, when we have difficult experiences in life that break us, either our fault or the circumstances around us, Moses said, don't despair. You will find God in the broken pieces, in the fragmented pieces of the tablets. Or as a good friend of mine, the Jewish poet Leonard Cohen wrote, forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Men and women in service feel this. There's a crack in everything. When we are experiencing persistent conflict, they are the ones, they are the heroes, together with you, who bear the burden of sacrifice, of the blood, of the death, of the pain, of the anguish, who bear the burden of separation from loved ones and families. Their lives that are fragmented. And here we learn from Joseph. Joseph could still come to 2 people who are in difficult situations, could look at himself and say, guys, why aren't you happy? How? Why? Because Joseph understood that you can find God in the broken tablets as well, not only in the whole tablets. And he was determined to give his people dignity in every experience and moment of life, believing that they could have a sense of joy even here. Joy doesn't mean fun. Life is not always fun, but life can always be meaningful. And what is happiness in the biblical imagination, if not the deep conviction and knowledge? I am where I ought to be, and I am connected with that which I ought to be connected. And right now I have the opportunity to kindle a flame of God in a dark world. That's happiness in the biblical imagination. Sure, we want happiness to be fun too. We pray for revealed goodness. We don't want broken tablets. We want whole tablets. But life breaks people. And what you, men and women, the men and women in the service see are often broken experiences. Too broken, too fragmented. And I see Joseph as the exemplary chaplain who comes again to his people and says, let's embrace each other and let's be happy, notwithstanding. There's an old story about an elderly Hasidic Jew. No, it wasn't Chaplain Goldstein. Because he is a young Hasidic Jew, destined to many more years. Should I say in the army, in front of your wife? He lived in the old village, and he owned 2 large pots. Each of the pots hung at the end of a pole. And he would carry the 2 pots every day on his shoulders to fill them with water from the stream located at the end of the village. This is the days, no sinks in the home, no water in the home, so he would take these 2 pots to the stream of water, fill them up with water and bring them back to his home. The problem was one of the pots was complete. It always delivered a full portion of water. The other pot was cracked, and it arrived each day half full. On the way home from the stream, half of the water would leave the pot that was whole, and only half of it would stay. Of course, the complete pot was proud of its accomplishments. It felt really good about itself. The poor cracked pot, on the other hand, was ashamed of its own imperfections. It was miserable that it could only do half the job. And it was still made to do it. After 6 years, what it perceived to be bitter failure, the humbled, broken pot finally mustered the strength to open its heart, quote unquote, to this old Hasidic Jew. And one day when they came home, the broken pot turned to its master and said, I hate myself. I am so useless and valueless. I compare myself to the other pot. Is full and wholesome, does a great job, and look at me. What a failure I am. What purpose does my existence have when each day I leak out so much of the water? I am a loser. And the old man smiled and said, tomorrow, on our way back from the stream, I want you to look out of yourself and look down on the ground. And the next day, when he was returning with the 2 pots, one filled without any holes and the other one filled with holes, he says, look down. And the pot noticed that there were flowers along the side of the path that it was taking, but not on the other side. The pot said, what is this? And he told her, I have always known about your flaws. I have always known about the cracks that exist in you. So I planted flower seeds on your side of the path. Every day while we walk back from the stream, you water them. For 6 years I have been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate our home and to grant it fragrance and a beautiful aroma. Without you being just the way you are, we would have never created this beauty together. This was the tale our mentors used to share with us when we talk about the broken tablets. God is not only in the wholesome tablets, but also in the broken tablets, because there are the unique flowers you and I can create and can inspire others to create. precisely through our imperfections. This is what Joseph understood, and this is what he was telling them. But the condition is I have to look outside of myself. I cannot be absorbed in my ego. He told the pot, look outside of yourself. And when you look outside of yourself, I can find meaning in my brokenness. And I can give that dignity to the people I minister to the people I love, to the people I am responsible for spiritually. So God tells Moses, thank you for breaking the tablets. This was a lesson Moses had to introduce. God himself, so to speak, couldn't introduce it as effectively as Moses because God is not broken. Moses could introduce it. And then there is another element in spiritual leadership during persistent conflict. And here I go to one more of the great chaplains of all history, you will agree, Moses himself. Moses is introduced by the Bible in 3 words. Moshe haya roeh, Moses was a shepherd. Is there another expression that describes the role of the chaplain? Moses was a shepherd. And the Midrash, which is the oral commentary on the Bible, explains what those words mean. Moses used to shepherd the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. And that is what inspired God to choose him as the leader of Israelites who would redeem them from bondage. But why? Just because he was a shepherd? So the Midrash tells us a little story about Moses. Moses was once out in the field with the shepherd, with the flock. And there were thousands and thousands of flock. It was an enormously large herd that he was tending to. And Moses suddenly noticed that one sheep was missing. And he went to search for it. And he found the sheep far away from the herd, searching for some water to irrigate its thirst. And Moses lifted up the sheep and said, my dear sheep, I did not realize you were thirsty. I'm so sorry. Come, let me bring you to the water. And God watched this and said, if this is how he treats sheep, I can entrust my people with him. Moses was a shepherd. And one of the commentators asks, come on! It's a nice story. It's a humanitarian gesture. But is that really the greatness of Moses? Would you and I not behave the same way? If you were given a little puppy to take care of, and the dog would run away, what should Moses do? Let the sheep die from dehydration? It's a nice thing to do. But why is it considered so special and so unique to the point that he becomes chosen by God as the great leader, as the prophet who will communicate the Bible? Why he? And the answer given to this is, my dear friends, this is not just a physical story, it's also a metaphor for life. You see, we sometimes see a sheep who runs away from the herd, runs away from the community, runs away from faith, runs away from God. And often we're compelled to point fingers and say, you ran away, you're a rebel, you don't belong. You will bear negative consequences. Becoming judgmental, pointing a finger to the sheep that left the cocoon of God, the cocoon of religion. That's not the way. Moses lifted the sheep up on his arms and he said, I didn't realize you were thirsty. I didn't realize you were thirsty. Meaning he understood very well that so many of our young men and women leave God and the path of God, not because they're bad or negative, but because they were thirsty for water of life and inspiration, and nobody showed them how godliness, how holiness can nurture their souls. Chaplains are shepherds not only for the religious men and women in service, for people who identify with religion, but for every single soldier whose soul is connected to God, whose soul yearns for deeper wholesomeness, for spirituality, for inspiration, but perhaps growing up, they have been thirsty and nobody showed them how God can become a source of water. So they had to leave. Because we ought to know that mankind does not have the choice of religion and neutrality. Our energies are too abundant for living indifferently. They once asked somebody, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy? And he said, I don't know and I don't care. Well, our energies are too abundant for not knowing and not caring. We are in need of an endless purpose to absorb our immense power. If our souls are not to decay, we are either the ministers of the sacred or slaves of evil. A human being cannot be neutral. We are either beyond being human or sometimes lower than being human. But when faith is completely replaced by creed, worship by discipline, love by habit, when the crisis of today is ignored because of the splendor of the past, when faith becomes monotonous rather than a living fountain, when religion speaks only in the name of authority rather than with the name of compassion, when God does not address the true needs of a real human soul, when God does not make us better human beings, more fulfilled, more happy, kinder, more graceful, more loving, more selfless, its message becomes meaningless. So Moses passed the test and God understood. He is the right chaplain. He is the right shepherd. Somebody who will not be judgmental, who will not look down, but understand that everybody was created in the image of God. That at the depth of each of our hearts is the light of God, and us, given the privilege of representing and teaching that wisdom, ought to be able to identify the holiness, the purity in every individual. Embrace them with that love. And remember that they may be thirsty. So we lift them up in their arms and say, come, let us drink the waters of faith together. Let us be here for each other. Where others see rebellion, Moses sees thirst. Where others see apathy, Moses sees yearning. Where others see alienation, Moses sees quest. And he's determined to give his men and his women that soul back, that depth. And finally, we discussed the individual attention and chaplaincy, meaning in brokenness, relevance of God. And I share with you a few words about the resilience in times of persistent conflict. How can I speak about this? Only, I think, because I'm the member of a people who, what America is going through today, confronting an enemy that unfortunately craves our complete destruction, but never mentioning to fail that if America is the big Satan, there's another Satan, the small Satan they call Israel. But far before our great country came into existence in the 18th century, the United States of America, the Jewish people have been hunted down generation after generation, not for 1 century or 2 centuries, not for 1 millennium, but for more than 3 millennia. Astonishingly, every great empire outside of the United States of America throughout history at one point or another saw the Jews as the target for abuse and annihilation. And we're here. So as a humble member of my people, I share with you a few reflections on resilience. The Jewish people always understood territory, military power, political structures are critical for the success of a country. But let's be frank. Egypt, ancient Assyria, ancient Babylonia, ancient Persia, ancient Greece, ancient Rome had this in abundance. They're not here today. Because what Jews always understood was what the Bible said. In Deuteronomy, Moses told them before he dies, as long as you cleave to God, you will remain alive. They understood that in the long run of history, it is not only the battles on the ground, but it's also the battle of the human heart that is so critical for the endurance of a nation. It's our endless commitment and dedication to goodness, to kindness, to morality, to ethics, to holding up the dignity of life that was created in the image of God, to cherish the liberty of an individual human being, to be committed to the morality and respect God demands from us. In the Bible, known in our tradition as the 7 Noahide laws, the basis of morality: respect for life, respect for marriage, respect for animals, respect for another human being's property, a moral judicial system, a faith and a respect to God. These were cornerstones and foundations that my people never abandoned. In valleys of tears and in hellish circumstances under savage suffering, they may have been weaker physically, but the flame in their heart, their commitment to morality and goodness, they never abandoned. And they are here today. And I am proud to be standing today here as a member of two of the most hated people in society today by some of our enemies. Because the United States of America, founded by the founding fathers, based on the ethics of the Bible, understood that this will become the power of the U.S. too. Sure, we celebrate our military and we must have a strong military. We cherish our territory. But the unique power of America is its commitment to the soul of the universe. Its commitment to God, its commitment to the morality, to the absolute and unequivocally respect for the morality and ethics articulated in the Bible. And that is what you represent in the U.S. military. The soul, the consciousness, the faith, the spiritual flame, which never allows a people to be destroyed. The other night, it was Friday night in my home, and as a Jew we celebrate what we call the Sabbath. Friday night and Sabbath day, no cell phones, no computers, no email, no fax machines, no movies, no television. No excuse. I'm going to the ballet. Families sit together and they're forced to talk. It was a brilliant idea. Moses came up with it a long time ago. If only Moses knew how smart he was with the era of cell phones. And it was Friday night a little while ago, and we do a kiddush, we do a special prayer on wine Friday night. And I picked up my cup to say the prayer, and my 5-year-old son stood up on a chair near me and put his hand over my shoulder. And I began to weep, and my wife was wondering, why is her husband crying? She could not know, only I knew. I knew what my father, my late father, always told me about his experience when he was 5 years old. He didn't grow up in New York. He grew up in Moscow, under Joseph Stalin. And it was Friday night in their home, and his father, my father's father, picked up the cup of wine to celebrate the Sabbath. And he was a 5-year-old boy, my father, and he said, I'll never remember how the KGB, the secret police, knocked down the door. And as his father was holding the cup of wine together with his beloved family, trying to have the Sabbath meal, they took him away. They took him away because he was practicing his religion openly and teaching the Torah to others. They sentenced him to death. Death by the firing squad. And then he made himself crazy. He started to throw the containers of ink on the judge, climb the walls. There was a policy you couldn't execute a meshugana, a nut job, an imbecile, so they hospitalized him. And they converted his sentence to 25 years in the Gulag. Stalin's kindness. He came out a broken man and died shortly after. This was in 1938 when he was arrested. Now it's 2008. 70 years later. And my 5-year-old son, same night, same Sabbath, put his hands on my shoulder. And we sang together the hymn and we made the blessing together. I was crying thinking what was happening 70 years ago. My grandfather is not here. My father is not here. But I knew that the prayer is here. The commitment is here. The faith is here. I'm here with my children transmitting the beauty of family, the beauty of love, the beauty of life, the beauty of faith. And that was very moving. And then I remembered the gift of the United States of America, where my father did not grow up. Grew up under communism, the tyranny of communism that claimed the lives of innocent people by the millions. Resiliency, persistent conflict, yes. But as long as we remain committed to our divine calling of goodness, of kindness. Goodness is eternal. Evil is temporary. It's powerful. It's ugly. It's devastating. But it's not eternal. It's not eternal because it represents the absence of God. God is eternal. Goodness is eternal. This is the country you represent. And this is the message you bring to the conflict. You bring to the difficult fields. You bring to the men and women in service, dedicated heart and soul to these values, to these ideals, till they can be reunited with their families and celebrate with them their meals and their parties and their prayers. And so I feel that it's incumbent upon me in conclusion, being invited here today by the Chief of Chaplains, to speak to you as a representative of my people, not only to discuss the 4 items we discussed, the personal attention, wholesomeness in brokenness, religion must be relevant, and the power of resiliency, but also as the representative of my nation, of my people, of Israel, of the Jewish people. I wish to say one more thing to you in conclusion, and that is, as a people that suffered persecution for thousands of years, the nation that granted humanity the idea of God, the nation that perhaps can be said paved a road in the jungle of history. I come here and I stand before you today and I say to you, each and every one of you, thank you. Thank you for granting us the opportunity to live and be protected by a country that put at its banner full liberty, physical and spiritual liberty to every individual. Sure, all Americans appreciate it, but a nation that's been around for thousands of years without it appreciates it far more. I thank you, dear chaplains, because it's you who grant our army its morale, its soul, its spirit, and therefore its resilience. Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
Goodness. I'm going to ask you to say a blessing. Is that appropriate in just a moment? Yes. I'm doing that. Sure. Let me say a few things first. Yes.
So I'll go back to my seat. And I'm Thank you. Thank you.
Let me respond for just a couple of moments and thoughts. Sonny, I've got a lot of sermon material out of that one. Rabbi, thank you for the wisdom from God that you've shared with us. And he and she who has ears to hear, let us hear. A reminder that we are in the position to celebrate with so many of those under our care. Our chaplains, our chaplain assistants, our soldiers, our family members who bring to the Army dreams. And may we not be too busy to celebrate the dreams of those sheep in our midst. And may we also never lose our compassion to minister to those whose dreams have been delayed or broken. And may we also not be too busy or apathetic or inattentive not to discern the great needs that are around us, because we all know in this room that the need is really great in this hour. We could hear today that we can only truly minister effectively by ministering out of our own brokenness. And Rabbi, many in this room that I know personally, and probably all of us, have our own story of brokenness. And that's why God has made you and I effective in this hour, because we work out of brokenness. Someone prayed for me last night and says, I pray for Chaplain Carver that he really learns how to grieve. I've never had anyone pray that for me, but I think I know what that means. As you look at our Army, as we are hanging on, as we look at our nation and the battle for the soul of our nation and our soldiers and the Army family, we should be grieving and calling out to God to restore the dignity of our nation. Rabbi, there's an old saying also in our chaplaincy. I've asked God to break this curse that has been placed over our chaplaincy. And you know the curse. The chaplaincy is the only branch in the Army that eats its young. And I pray that as a result of hearing this message today, that something has resonated in our soul. And that no longer be the case over the Army chaplaincy. That we don't point the fingers in judgment, but that we're looking for those who are lost and are in need of the hand of God. As Chaplain Pace says in one of his little sayings, every soldier has a soul. May that burden our hearts. Oh, by the way, and every chaplain and every chaplain assistant has a soul as well. And may God use your words, your powerful words this morning to bless and bring healing to us as we minister to our soldiers, the Army family. You know, we say the enemy has a vote in this war. But I've also been encouraged that God is the one who counts those votes. And He is the one who is in charge. And may He continue to bless us in this very difficult work, but also encouraging work. A UMT, a chaplain assistant, a chaplain cannot have a bad day. If you're going to have a bad day, stay home. Because our soldiers and our families need us to be messengers of hope. Rabbi, we have just a token of our appreciation. As you sip your tea or coffee, these are some coasters with your name on it as a reminder of this occasion. Just thank you for the gift that God has brought through you to us today. I also have a coin which we tried to symbolize what the chaplaincy is all about, and there's one of our oldest symbols is the chaplain with the shepherd's crook, and that's for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And we would ask you, before you leave us, to pray a blessing or pray a prayer over us, please.
Of course. Let us pray. May God Almighty bless each and every one of our men and women in service. Bring them home safe and secure to their families, to their loved ones. May God grant our great country the success it needs to uphold its commitment to the liberty of every individual, to the safety of every individual. May God grant all of you, dear chaplains, assistants, the strength, the serenity, the courage, the clarity, the focus to be able to be there for your men and women who need you this great hour and difficult hour. That when you wake up in the morning, you have the vision and the inspiration to be able to give them your soul, your love, your compassion. May God grant you the words, the right motions, even the right gestures to convey your dedication to your men and women, to embrace them with deep sensitivity, compassion, and love, to be there for them, to be there for their souls, to be there for their bodies, to be there for their loved ones in all of their challenges and ups and downs and fluctuations. May all of us have the strength to continuously experience ourselves as agents of God, as instruments of God, to introduce His light and His blessings into our world, to kindle each day a flame of hope and of love and of holiness and of goodness and kindness in the darkness of our world. May God be with each and every one of you, each and every one of our spouses, each and every one of our children, all good people here and all around the world. And may I conclude with the words that Moses said to the Israelites. He said, may it be the will of God that the divine presence dwell in the works of your hands. May the pleasantness of God be over you. And may He imbue all of your words and all of your deeds with His grace, with His power, with His kindness. May we all feel united. May we all always love each other and give that love to the people around us, to the men and women in service. Give them the gift of prayer. Give them the gift of love. Give them the gift of hope, and give them the gift of life. Amen.